Hey guys, and welcome back to SLT time. This is episode 4. So last week on episode 3, we had a bunch of students speaking about their experiences at university, but also on placement. Today we are going to be talking about the next step after that in terms of workplace, getting into jobs, and how to progress within that. So from the SLT time team, we've got me, Ilya, we've got Mariam, and we've got Saha, and we're joined today by our guest, Nazia.
Hi there, thank you for inviting me on this podcast. My name's Nazia, a speech language therapist. I work with children in London, and I'm currently acting as a service lead, overseeing a group of all the speech language therapists, occupational therapists, and physiotherapists that work within our school years team.
Thanks for joining us. Really cool to have someone so high up there on the panel today. So first, we're just going to read some tweets that we got in response to last week's episode. Again, thank you so much for engaging and reaching out to us. We really appreciate it. So first, I've got a tweet here by Gemma McCallum, so at Gemma McCallum 3. She said, another great episode. I absolutely agree with SLTea about the presence of nepotism when applying to university SLT courses. It is so hard to gain experience with an SLT before applying, and those who know SLTs personally are much more likely to gain this experience. Those who have connections to SLTs are likely to be in a better position to apply already, meaning that this cycle is continually perpetuated. If universities insist on applicants gaining experience with SLTs prior to applying, then this needs to be addressed. She also says that she was able to gain experience with an SLT prior to applying because her mum is a pediatric nurse and knew someone through work. While at the time she knew that it was incredibly lucky to gain this experience, she now understands that it's a form of white privilege. So yeah, that's really interesting. I think last week they spoke a lot about getting that initial foot in the door in any kind of healthcare experience is quite difficult from people who are not exposed to that kind of networks, maybe don't have family members who are in those type of jobs. So yeah, thanks for that, Gemma. Another tweet from an SLT to be, Imogen. Another fantastic episode reflecting on all my trips up and down the country to attend open days and interviews, getting multiple expensive trains and on my own, and then ending up getting into UEA by a phone call. It's definitely a process that needs reviewing. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like that experience of the financial burden of the application process is not exclusive to BME communities as well. I think all students who are coming from who are looking to go into further education have to consider the financial burden it will put on. So yeah, thanks for that, Imogen. And also we got a tweet from Helen Cameron, and she is actually an admissions tutor and a teacher at Sheffield University. Yeah, so I was correcting me because she went to Sheffield Uni as well. So she said, these fabulous women were excellent company on my run this morning. As an admissions tutor, teacher, and practice educator, there is so much important stuff in this episode for me to hear and learn. Also, undergraduate admission tutors are not expecting shadowing experience or direct contact with SLTs and applications, especially not now with COVID, but even before. There's lots of other free ways to find out about the profession and show learning, like watching these videos. Lots of universities now offer travel grants for interviews for widening participation candidates and offer interview prep or practice sessions. Still lots of work to do in terms of early experiences of programs being mainly or completely white. With many universities facing financial restrictions now, we'll need to work hard to ensure that initiatives such as these and things like paying guest lecturers to increase BME representation in teaching in absence of contracted staff aren't sacrificed. Training for staff, interviews, and practice educators is really important, and I think this video should form part of any training program. Thank you, SLT time and guests, for all that you're doing. Thanks for that, Helen. I think it's really great to hear from somebody who's actually on the inside of that process in terms of an admission tutor. So like she said, you don't actually need that kind of prior experience. They don't expect that. And there are other alternatives in terms of bursaries and fundings that are available, but we just don't know about them. Like that information isn't easily accessible. So I think one big step would be that community outreach, and just letting people from ethnic minorities or low-income communities know that these options and routes are available to them. And lastly, I just wanted to make a shout out to Layla, who did an amazing thread, which kind of summarized our first episode on the Black Lives Matter statement really well. I'll put it up here on the screen, but go and check it out on Twitter. Her is @LaylaBonts. And yeah, it just made some really good points and really summarized some of the stuff that we said really concisely. So yeah, recommend go checking that out on Twitter. Thanks for that, Layla. We love you always.
Today we're going to be talking a little bit about workplace conversations around race, diversity. We're going to be talking a bit about our personal experiences, our interview processes, also kind of the self-reflection of being a therapist. So looking at our own biases, how it impacts our work, how it impacts our kind of planning for therapy. So yeah, I guess we could start off with talking about our personal experiences, what we're doing now, what it's been like to get to the point that you are at now.
My experience is I've actually been finding it really difficult to get my foot in the door for the field that I kind of always imagined I wanted. I mean, now I'm doubting myself. I don't know what I want to do. But when I graduated last year in August 2019, I thought I wanted to end up in something dysphagia related, and I always thought that I wanted to be in a hospital. And so obviously naturally I was applying for adult acute positions. I went on the Cambodia trip, so I didn't start applying until January this year, and I had maybe 3 interviews, and I didn't get any of them. And I really was like, at the time I was thinking, okay, I'm not any more experienced, and it's about me and my skills and this. And then I sort of put that tweet out there. I put a tweet out there about something and just mentioned that I was struggling, and I got some really shocking responses about people who have sort of flew up the band ladder. And then it really made me start to question myself, like, oh, is it really me and my competency as a therapist, or is it something bigger and wider than that? I mean, I'm still not sure. I have been working in the meantime privately for adult community and gaining that experience. And I feel like even with that experience, for some reason, there's a barrier in these interviews that I've been having trying to get my foot in the hospital door. I mean, it could be anything and anything, but from the conversations I've been having lately, it does make you think that is it something to do with me as a person, me and my background? But that feelings of self-doubt are really kind of playing the last few months. So I only actually got the job that I got now is because my boss was one of my practice educators as a student, so she knew me really well. I don't know if I would have gotten anything if it wasn't for that, which is really lucky.
Yeah, so I'm a paediatric community therapist at the moment and have been, yes, in the same job since graduating. For me, it's kind of like the step up as well to the next bands. And I remember in the interview process, there wasn't that kind of representation there on the panel. So already I kind of felt a bit, I felt like, is this what the whole team is going to be like? And yeah, I think since then it's kind of been very much apparent to me that it's going to be difficult for me to go up the banding, and I've kind of accepted that, especially kind of where I am now, I suppose, and not seeing that role model. And also kind of there isn't a lot of discussion in my workplace around things like this, and it's only recently that it's happening, which is positive, obviously. But I think until we get that information, we get the stats, we have those conversations, we have those networks, I don't think anything's going to change. And I don't think I'm going to see more people in the BAME category in positions of leadership.
Yeah, I find that really interesting. And also Veronica, who's in part of the SLTea time, she's had it really difficult. She lives in Bristol, and she found it really difficult to find a job. And I thought maybe that's because London is a lot more diverse, and that's maybe why it's easier to get a band 5 job. But hearing other people's experiences, it doesn't seem like that's necessarily the case. I mean, I was really keen as soon as I finished, before I even finished uni, I started applying for jobs, and I think that's because I had already done a degree before, and I was like, I've had enough, I want to earn some money. So I went for interviews while I was on placement. But my last placement was an adult acute setting, and I really thought that that's what I wanted to do and where I wanted to work, and I really loved it. And I don't know if it's because it was a 6-month placement, and that's what they do at the course that I was in. So I did apply to a few adult jobs, but I wasn't really getting anywhere. I just ended up applying for peds, and I did get a job before I graduated. So for me, I think I had 3 interviews, and I didn't get the first one, but then I got the last 2. And I think for me, in terms of, you know, wanting to work in an adult setting, I wonder if more like support from uni in terms of interview skills and what to expect in an interview, or how to even answer the questions. I feel like a lot of the time the candidate, or, you know, when I speak to colleagues that have applied, I know that they would be really good for the job that they're applying for, and then they have the experiences, and then they don't get the job, and I'm like, what? How did that happen? So I wonder if it's sort of support in that sense, in terms of answering the questions, and how the scoring works, and what to say in the interview to help you stand out. That would help. But I think in terms of progression, I think it is a lot more difficult. And it's really, I think, without data in terms of BAME therapists in different bands, I think it's really hard for us to be able to find out whether it's that, or whether everyone finds it hard to progress, depending on like the jobs out there, and so on. But there was a blog post on that Dr. Anna Volkmer posted with an black adult therapist. I think her name is Sharon, and Sharon interviewed 17 times, and she was clearly, you know, she was clearly capable, and, you know, she graduated with a degree, and she was clearly capable of her job, and I believe now she's quite high in the bands and is in a managerial role, and is applying for a PhD. Sorry, this is relying on my memory, so I might completely go. But that just shocked me, and I just thought, you know, that I think that just speaks a lot in itself. I think from my experience anyway, and it's always been at the back of my mind. I mean, as much as I love working with children, it was something that I wanted to do when I graduated, so I did consider applying to an adult job after, but it means at that point I was a band 6, and I was like, do I want to go back to a band 5?
Yeah.
So yeah, but I do, from my experience anyway, it was a lot easier for me to get a peds job than an adult job. I feel like I'm like,
no, you're questioning me. You're kind of convincing. Shall I go into adults now? I'm so great. Yeah. So yeah, I think listening to what you've been talking about so far, and then just reflecting a bit on my own journey as well, I think it is hard to get your foot in the door, even right from getting that first job. And I think, you know, what you were mentioning earlier about, you know, going for interviews and having lots of jobs, I think this is something which all of us, regardless of whether you're of a BAME background or not, you have that feeling, don't you, of am I good enough? Am I not good enough? You know, do I deserve it? Do I not? Am I just bluffing my way through? You know, that imposter syndrome, we all suffer from that. But then arguably you could say that it is a lot more prevalent in the BAME community, particularly if you're female as well. So, you know, we've got that, you know, double threat there. We've got both of those ticked there. And I had the exact same thing. I remember when I qualified, I left uni just glad that I managed to get some kind of degree, because I struggled, you know. I wasn't one of those children that did okay in school, just kind of, you know, sailed through, and then suddenly uni hits you and you're like, whoa, this is really hard. And it was great. I went through the course, but I never felt like I was good enough. And it took me about 5 interviews until I eventually got my NQP job. And thankfully, it was, even on paper, the best kind of job that I would have wanted out of all of the ones. But the fact that I had to go through so many, it really kind of crushes your confidence, and it's soul destroying whenever you hear that feedback of, oh, you were great, but not just what we're looking for. And you're thinking, that's just not that constructive, you know? What does that mean? That you obviously met the criteria, but there's something that's intrinsically about you that isn't, you know, something that you can work on, that it's not, well, you need to brush up on this or that. It's just, right, there you go. Just keep at it, you know, because eventually you will get that job. And I think with me, thinking about what then happened for the following years, and, you know, that feeling about progression and wanting to move on, I think someone earlier mentioned about bandings and kind of moving up. And I think that's the wrong way to look at it, because you don't want to see yourself as, you know, how quickly can I get to this level? Ultimately, it's about job satisfaction, and are you happy doing the job that you're doing? And naturally, there may come a point where you're not being stimulated or fulfilled, and then that's when you naturally go into a different position job, which might be the step up. But I think it's making sure that you're going for jobs and opportunities for the right reason, and not because you're comparing yourself to others or because you feel like you need to be somewhere at a particular level. And I've been through all those stages, and I think, you know, earlier on, a good few years ago, when I was in my band 6 role, I was in that band 6 job for 6 years, no, 6.5 years, almost 7 years. So quite a long time to be a band 6. And lots of my friends at the time were saying, well, why are you still a band 6? Why aren't you looking for 7s? Or, you know, you could do it. And I think for me at that point, up until I think when I was about 4 years into a band 6 role, up until the 4th year mark, I was loving my job. You know, I was working in different settings, I was being stimulated, I was going on trainings, I was working with fantastic colleagues. So why would I look for a band 7 job just because it's a band 7? No, I'm feeling stimulated and fulfilled and have amazing job satisfaction, even though, you know, people would say, but why are you still doing that? So I think it's important to just keep that in mind as well, and just make sure that you are doing it for the right reasons. And then when you do feel ready to kind of step up, then you can start thinking about what skills and things you need to go for that job. So it was only in those final 2 years of a band 6 role when I started to get those feelings of frustration of, as though, you know, I'm not learning anything new, I'm not enjoying it, I need to look for band 7 jobs. And at that time, at first, it didn't really strike me clearly that I wasn't able to get these jobs, not because I was cocky or thinking that I could get it, but it's because I knew I was good enough, but there was something holding me back. And I thought, well, what is that? And up until that point, you know, we didn't have this level of awareness of, you know, all of the things that we're talking about now that's come to light around microaggressions. Again, I never heard of that term until very recently, in the last kind of 2 years, I'd say. But even 5, 6, 7 years ago, this was all completely unheard of to me. So I would have been one of those people who thought, why can't I get what would then be a band 7 job? I've been doing this job for almost a decade now. What's going on? So yeah, it kind of hits you at different stages of your career, and you kind of need to think through, you know, what is it that is preventing you, and making sure that you do kind of educate yourself. And I think that's why having these discussions now, talking about issues around diversity and inclusion, talking about cultural competencies and how you can better yourself, it's so important. And I'm just, you know, I wish I had this sooner, earlier on in my career. But it's fine, it's all good. But I think thinking about interviews in particular, everyone gets nervous at interviews. And even when you're on the other side, so even just earlier this week, I was on an interview panel, and you're just as nervous when you're interviewing people because you can feel their nerves and you're willing them to do well. But I think for us from a BAME community, I do think that we do have a lot more of that self-doubt, and that lack of confidence, which is to our detriment at interviews particularly. We naturally don't sell ourselves. We see it as not a good trait. I am completely generalizing here, and of course there are kind of different kind of exceptions, but my experience is that on the whole we aren't good at bigging ourselves up, about showing off, about highlighting and advocating for ourselves and how great we are, and that is what you want to see at interviews. And then, you know, this is all kind of things which are being indoctrinated within us from an early age. When you're thinking about in education and in schooling, and thinking about, what are the messages that were sent to us from childhood, from your family, from teachers, what kind of careers or jobs are you kind of pushed towards, and thinking about, are you someone that comes from a culture where it's seen as a good quality, a good trait to boast about how great you are, or is it more polite to be quite polite and demure and just kind of, just politely nod along and, stay in your place basically. And then that translates in the job situation as well. And so naturally, of course, at interviews, we're going to feel awkward when you're asked questions about, talk about, an example where you've demonstrated a particular skill, and you're thinking, oh yeah, well, I know I can do that, but was it really me? Oh, I did a bit. Oh, I'm not quite sure. And you're like, why not? You sell yourself. This is your only opportunity. And I think for some kind of populations, or for some groups of people, that might come naturally to them. If you're someone, again, completely generalizing here, but a privileged white male, for example, might be a lot more confident and have that natural air of gravitas to be able to go in and own a room and have that sense of authority to say, yes, I belong here because that has been my right. And we need to channel that confidence, not to say that what they're doing is wrong. What they're doing is great. We just need to have more of that ourselves. We need to be celebrating our differences, our individuality, celebrating each other's achievements, and making sure you recognize your own self-worth and how great you are, because only then can other people see it. So that would be my main advice in terms of interview skills. Obviously that, and make sure you know yourself now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I was listening to the AHP Leader podcast the other day, and they were talking about something quite similar, and someone on the panel was saying that for another person, they'll see a job description, and let's say they meet 60% of that. I'm not sure, maybe Nazia, you were on that podcast. I can't remember, my memory is not very good.
I think I might have said that actually.
No, did you say that yourself?
Yeah, I do remember that one.
And I just remember I just remember just like, oh my god, that is so true. Like they were saying that they'd meet 60% of it, and they would apply for it because, yeah, of course, I meet 60%, more than half. Whereas for me personally, I'll be like, oh, I can't do that job because I don't have the other 40%, and it's and that, I think that was just an eye opener for me when I listened to it, and I was like, that just describes everything.
Yeah, because that is so true, because that is what holds you back as well. And I think that was where I read that's more of a male-female thing, so it's not necessarily BAME, but I think that comes into it. But it is, yeah, absolutely, that notion of, I have to meet 100% of the criteria before I can even consider applying for that job. When, when you apply for any job, you're not expected to know everything. You're developing into that role. So, of course, it's understandable that you're not going to know it all. But it's making sure that not only is it thinking about, are the opportunities available to everyone, but are you then taking those opportunities yourself? But then also, are you being supported and encouraged to take those opportunities? So again, with that job description, were you aware that that job was advertised? If it was, say, an internal thing that's gone around, did you feel confident and motivated enough to feel like, yes, I can do this? And do you also have a supportive environment which gives you that confidence to say, yes, you can go for it, rather than those insidious, subtle hints to say, yes, you're great at your job, like what you're doing right now is great, hint, hint, stay in your little box, So you just need to make sure that everything is in line to help you to progress.
really actually interesting having you here as somebody who's been involved in that interview process. And I just wanted to think, everybody, where do you think the work needs to be done in terms of breaking down that wall between BAME communities getting those jobs and getting those positions? Is it universities in giving you the skills, or is it the interviewers in terms of giving that consideration, or like where along this cycle are we meant to be putting the input to support people from ethnic minority backgrounds in getting these positions at all levels of the banding?
I think in terms of helping BAME therapists progress, I think supervisors have a really a great position there. I remember in my first trust, I had a really good supervisor that is sort of, I felt like he pushed me to apply for band 6 jobs and other jobs, and I just needed that little push, and that I just needed someone higher than me to be like, you can do that job.
Yeah.
Just do it. because I would sort of sit there and think, I've just got my competency signed, do I apply? And I felt like when I was a 5, I didn't really know at what point you can apply. Like, I didn't realize that you can even apply before you get your competencies signed. Like, if you're just about to get them signed, you can apply for a band 5 job, and that is possible, but I didn't know that was a thing.
And it's really interesting about what you said, Nazia, about kind of the way we kind of tiptoe around things as well. I was just thinking, because in my trust they have a program now that they have like a BAME representation on the panel. So I don't know if that's the thing that people do across I don't know what it's like in your trusts. I think that's a positive thing, definitely. So yeah, I think there's a responsibility there from both universities and employers.
Yeah, I would agree what Mariam was saying earlier about having good supervision, for sure. But I think also remembering that, supervision it's a two-way process. So I think it's not relying just on your supervisor to do all of the pushing and motivating, which they absolutely should, and make sure you are kind of developing. But also, as the supervisee, it's your role to make sure you're getting the most out of your supervision. So asking questions like, so what do you think I should do to help make myself, band 6 ready, or whatever, or what skills do you feel I need to develop on? Can we talk about some actual constructive advice there we can work on? Because sometimes even we all want to hear get compliments, which is brilliant, and that would be nice. When your supervisor tells you you're doing a great job, that's great, but then where's the development there? And I think that's the danger, and that's kind of the trap that happened to me at the point when I stayed in my then band 6 role for quite a while. After I was feeling a little bit niggly and restless, the feedback I was getting was really good, but there wasn't anything constructive in there. So then I had to say, okay, so it's great that you're pleased with what I'm doing, but what new things can I do? Right, how do I demonstrate this skill and that skill? So I think it's kind of even at uni, or when you're on placements, those kind of skills start then when you're doing reflective logs and reflective practice. That's all about thinking about your own skills, what things to work on, how what you did impacted on them and what they did impacted on you. That it's true. When you learn about it at uni, it is completely lifelong throughout your career. And I think when you start getting those feelings, you need to kind of have those good discussions with your supervisor, and also not just with your supervisor, but making sure you have really strong networks around you, whether it's peer support, friends, colleagues outside of work. I think for me, what really helped was having a BAME network within my workplace. When I joined my current workplace about 5 years ago, I knew there was a BAME network, but I didn't really think much of it, just because I thought, it doesn't have any impact on me. What's that got to do with speech and language therapy? It's not relevant. And I've never really experienced any kind of direct racism or discrimination or anything, thankfully. So I didn't really see the point. But then I joined just out of curiosity to think, well, I am BAME background, and why not? Let's see what it's about. And actually, it was really useful, just because it was only when I joined that BAME network that I began to put the pieces together of those feelings of self-doubt and did someone really do that? Did I read too much into that? What I now know to be microaggressions, but again, I didn't have the knowledge and the terminology at the time to link certain behaviors and actions. And so you do question, you do doubt whether things had happened. So being part of that network helped me to raise my awareness of understanding of what was going on. And also from a practical level, there were things which they signposted me to, specific courses and events and things to do with leadership, actually, which really helped. And my managers were very supportive and encouraged me to go on. But I only knew about those courses because I was part of the network. Otherwise, they wouldn't have told me about it. Not in anything intentionally, but just because it wasn't advertised. So yeah, I would say it's try to do as much reaching out as you can, even when it's things like reaching out to these podcasts and talking, being part of the SLTea groups. I think just that feeling of being part of a community is so powerful. Helps you feel like, you know, you're not alone, and quite often even that is enough to just give you that extra boost to help you go for whatever it is you want to do.
Yeah, I definitely think that having a network and community is so vital for your self-esteem. Like, I feel like I have a bit of an inferiority complex or something, like on placement and at work. Like, I feel like I'm very conscious about the way I speak. Like, I'm not completely well spoken. Like, I'm trying hard now, but usually like my mom and my family always say that I just sound like a chav, basically. And I think I'm really conscious about that at work. So I don't really engage in sort of small talk with like my white colleagues. And I try to avoid that kind of discussions as much as possible. And like you said, in your supervision sessions, you need to, as the supervisee, be able to also demand that from those sessions. And I think because of those feelings, I've never been able to do that. I always feel like I would be uncomfortable bringing big questions to my supervisor. I don't want to come across as stupid, or I don't want to come across as, you know, uneducated or whatever. And I think that is something that's unique to our communities and from our backgrounds. And I think what has helped me is making these networks on Twitter and these connections and talking to so many really inspirational people doing amazing things. But this is all recent. I didn't know these kind of networks and communities and groups existed. I especially didn't know that NHS Trust had them. I didn't know that that was something that was within workplaces as well. I thought we had to go and build those connections and communities ourselves online. So they've all sort of come to light recently, but I think letting people know what's available out there for them is really, really important. And yeah, I think having a space like this with like-minded people with similar experiences that you can talk to about your feelings and your barriers that you face really helps you, and kind of bring the confidence back that you are skilled, you do have skills. We've all completed the course, like, so we've passed the course, we are speech therapists, like, don't doubt that. And just, I think you need that validation from people who have had the same sort of struggles. So yeah, I think connections are really important. For me personally, the last few months, I've definitely felt my self-esteem slowly coming back up after beginning of 2020 of rejections, basically.
And it's so hard because I feel like you're constantly doubting yourself anyway. Like, the imposter syndrome is so real in this career. So like you said, just having like a network, like in my trust, there's very recently just been a network. And even just being in the like Q&A sessions with everyone has just felt so, just so lovely to have that network of people who, you know, have had those experiences. I would say though, for, you know, leaders and people in those positions that are maybe watching, there should be kind of quite explicit policies about what to do and how to handle those situations, you know, negative experiences. Because there were, you know, in that network, there were loads of people who had experienced that and just were saying it then and hadn't felt comfortable to talk to their manager. So yeah, there should be a policy, and there should be, you know, a no tolerance thing around these issues. And that's something that should really be in place at university and in the, what's it called, in the placements as well.
Yeah, I think it's so important to have those safe spaces. I think in the previous podcast, I remember someone mentioned about if you're having an issue on placement, the last thing you want to do is raise it in your tutorials for fear of what you think the repercussions might be, especially if it looks or impacts negatively on you. And then there's that panic of, is it going to affect my grade if I speak up, especially if I'm on a paid placement and it's just me and not the other person. So yeah, it's really important that you feel that you've got that safe space to air any concerns without the fear of what a repercussion might be.
Go back to Ilya's point about sort of having those conversations and going into supervision and thinking, this is my time and what do I want to take out of it. I just think it just resonates with me so much, and I think it goes back to how we were brought up, well, how I was brought up as a child, in that you, for example, when I was younger and with your teacher, like she's your teacher, or how we would sort of interact with our elders. And then I had that in uni as well, for example. So I would have never at uni been able to go up to my lecturer and be like, this happened and I wasn't happy with how it was handled, or I would have just never been able to do that. It was more like, I'm the student, so you just take it and you deal with it and you respect them to that level. And I think that definitely impacts me till now. And I was talking to my siblings about it as well. I remember once I went, so in my first degree, not speech and language, when I did my biology degree, I went to a lecturer because I wanted feedback on an assignment that I did. And the way he treated me, thinking back on it, was horrendous. Like, he basically just questioned why I was at uni and I wasn't clearly capable of doing this assignment, and it wasn't helpful at all. And that was clearly grounds for me to go and complain about that, situation. And I just did not have the courage to do that because he was my lecturer. So I just take it and deal with it. He probably has a point, and I think that's at work as well, is seeing my colleagues as, yes, you're my manager, yes, you know more than me, yes, you're my supervisor and you're able to advise me, but I still sort of see it as, I'm the student, if that makes sense. Even as a band 6, like, I'll find it really hard to sort of take control of that situation. So I think, and I'm definitely learning, and I'm definitely able to do that more in terms of, using supervision as a space for me to grow and to be able to, like, address different situations. But I think it's definitely deeply rooted in things that we actively need to work on, or I actively need to work on personally, to be able to have those conversations.
I think that's such a good point you raised, and I could definitely echo similar things. I remember when I was in my band 5 job, and quite early on, going to one of these kind of big team meetings that you go to, and there's everyone in speech therapy is there, and you're nervous, you're thinking, oh, I'm just the lovely band 5, I'm not going to don't speak unless you're spoken to. It's exactly what you were saying. There's that hierarchy and level of respect. And I remember fellow kind of band 5s would just openly join in and participate and question something the manager had said. It was all appropriate questioning, but I was thinking, oh my god, I could never do that. How can we do that? Can we do that? That's great. Oh gosh, I wish I could do that, but I'll just sit there silently, quiet, and then the meeting was over. But then that adds to that perception, isn't it, of do you know your things? Do you know your stuff? Are you able to contribute your ideas? Well, actually, yes, you do have lots of ideas, but there's that level of cultural awareness that you need to have, where in some cultures it's considered impolite to question authority, and it's hard to challenge that thinking if that's the way that you've been raised. And then thinking about how that links into leadership, or even things like promotions that come up, all of those kind of behaviors and skills feeds into how promotions might be given to people within the team, and where there's the concern around favoritism, and you're thinking, but how does that happen? Why is there that favoritism? And people like what they see reflected back in them, and there's obviously the physical side of it, but also in terms of personality, mannerisms, behavior, that all comes into play. And it's thinking about how those kind of behaviors might be misinterpreted. So you or me at that time not speaking up would have been seen as someone who doesn't have a lot to say, doesn't have lots of innovative ideas, seems maybe a bit aloof. Do we really want that person in my team? Versus we might misinterpret someone else as being disrespectful and rude for kind of speaking up over someone else. So it's all about how things are interpreted, and it all comes back to cultural competency. That's what you need a lot more of to help prevent all of this happening. Because I think there's what you have is the hidden culture, which is how decisions are really made, versus the workplace culture, which is what should happen. So by the kind of the workplace culture, it's thinking about having all of your policies and procedures in place, having jobs advertised to everyone, making sure that it's a level playing field and you're doing everything by the book. That's all fine. But then the hidden culture is thinking about how do people gain favor with those that are in positions of power, i.e. the people that make the decisions, like the managers and the heads of service. And how do you win favor with them? So if you work in an environment where all of your kind of managers, team leads like to go to the pub every Friday, and you don't do that for particular reasons, well, then you're not part of that little clique then, where you get to have those social discussions. And that is the hidden culture. And that is where most of the decisions are made, where people have that perception of who they want in their team and who they like, and it's kind of, let me go and make a coffee for you. Oh, I'll come with you. Or you can go out to buy something. Oh, let me come along with you. And you're thinking, okay, I'll just stay here having my lunch on my own because for whatever reason. And you don't realize it's happening, but then suddenly when you stop and reflect and you think, right, let me just think about my workplace. Let me think about what actually is happening. That all feeds into how decisions are made. And then suddenly you think, why didn't I get that job? I did everything perfect. And you're like, yeah, but there were some things that just weren't within your control. And again, that's where cultural competency comes in, because a lot of this is being done subconsciously. So even the managers aren't aware that they're doing it. And if it was highlighted to them, I'm hopeful majority would be completely horrified and think, oh gosh, I had no idea. So that's why we need cultural competency training throughout from uni onwards, throughout your career. But it's just something to just be aware of. And I think the plus side actually during COVID, during lockdown, is because we're all remote working, that isn't coming into play. So you can't have any of those kind of, let's kind of have that little secret chat in the staff room away from everyone else, or let me try and, rub up the manager and kind of, win favour with them. Well, that's not really happening because you're all kind of doing remote working. So that's helping us at the moment, I think.
That's so true, yeah. But yeah, I think that's really important point. I mean, we love talking about cultural competency here. And I think linking to what both of you were saying, Sahar and Nazia, about policies and stuff, I think organizations and universities, they don't know what policies they can implement at this sort of micro level, this sort of daily occurrence of, let's go to the pub. And how do you even start to create policies and guidelines around that within the workplace without completely managing every single thing that a person does and putting limitations on any form of personality or expression? Like, it's really complex. And so I think to tackle that at a micro level, exactly like you said, Nazia, it's all about cultural competency, further education, learning, and everybody really taking ownership of that, professional development of and awareness of their own biases and their own actions and how it impacts them in the workplace, as lecturers or as students. I think, it's really, really important. We'll be talking more about cultural competencies next week as well, hopefully. So I think that ties in really nicely.
In terms of like with the social side of things, being able to socialize with work colleagues is really important. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes, you need policies and things in place, but even just common sense things like, why don't you do a picnic this time, or go to a restaurant? Or, I've had Jewish colleagues in the past where they can't socialize on Friday because of their religious beliefs. So then great, we'll do Thursday. a lot of it is just common sense things, you know, it's not rocket science, a lot of it, but you do need to spell it out. And yeah, we can talk, I guess, at some point about how to have workplace discussions, but a lot of the time it's kind of, even just, you might kind of brace yourself and for having these kind of conversations, and actually it's just really straightforward, and most of the time it's kind of, oh, I didn't even consider that so-and-so can't come out on a Friday. Yeah, well, I've got no problem with Tuesday night instead. You know, oh great, there was no big deal about that at all.
Yeah, and I think a lot of therapists that we work with will be fine with that. I mean, I've had experiences in both trusts that I sort of work in where we'll just go to a restaurant, and if someone wants to buy a drink, then they can buy a drink. You know, I can have my pizza. Yeah, I mean, it's simple things, isn't it? But sometimes we just need to sort of just point them out. And I think it's just having the confidence to say, like, I would be very confident in saying, oh, sorry, I can't go to the pub, but maybe we can go and grab a coffee, or maybe we can go to this restaurant instead. Like, but I know that there are other people that won't have the confidence to say that, and will just make up an excuse that they can't turn up because they don't want to have that discussion, because it can be uncomfortable and it can be hard.
How I think we could just sort of round up everything that we're talking about and give sort of a practical solution on how to instigate these workplace conversations for people who are listening and trying to get that answer of how do I have that conversation with my colleagues or with my supervisors at work and who are experiencing all these kind of things.
I just use a friend. If I'm finding it really hard, it's probably not the best way of doing it, but if it's something, for example, like going out, then my friends do normally just say, oh, Miriam can't go to the pub, so, and then suggest something else. And it's normally, maybe living in London, I'm a bit biased, but I think people know that I can't go to the pub when they look at me. So, like, if someone asks me to go to the pub, I'll just look at them like, really? So I think that one is a quite obvious one for me. But you'd be surprised.
I kind of had the opposite, where I had a colleague many years ago who she did wear a hijab, and she would get offended at not being asked to the pub.
Oh, really?
Why do you assume I don't want to go to the pub? I'm like, but do you want to go to the pub? No, I don't. But it's a principle.
But this the thing is that everybody is different, and like
that's the thing. It's true.
To know how to navigate these relationships at work and how to instigate these conversations.
And yeah, it depends very much on the situation, isn't it? And is it something that something has happened to you and you feel like it needs to be addressed in that way? It's kind of also thinking, do you feel it was intentional, unintentional? How do you address it without you coming across as, aggressive or overly sensitive? And yeah, there's lots of things to consider, but I think, ultimately, if you kind of know the basics around, don't be rude, don't, be kind of respectful, be as clear and concise with whatever the issue is. I think most people should be fine with just having a conversation, and I think it may be awkward at first. There might be lots of that, oh, but that's not what I meant. Oh, that was unintentional. I didn't mean to. Like that's going to happen in the initial phase. You just got to get through that and then get into the nitty gritty. But I think, we're all speech language therapists. This is our profession, communication. But we also overanalyze communication as well because of it, which is to our detriment, I guess. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think as long as you either you start that conversation or you facilitate and support someone else too, especially if kind of you're party to witnessing something else happening, then it's quite good to kind of speak up as well. But yeah, I think it's going to be hard, but there's no right way, I think, of starting a conversation. You just got to do it. And I think particularly if you're someone that's quite emotional or you're feeling quite aggrieved by something that's happened, trying your best to stay calm, I would say, especially if you get a lot of that defensiveness thrown back at you, which probably is going to happen quite a lot. just kind of bracing yourself for that and not being quite retaliatory straight away, because this is obviously a learning curve for the other person. And I think what I've kind of learned to realize as well, I think we're having this great awakening moment, and everyone's kind of learning all about these issues, but we have to, we're all going in it together, whether you're of a BAME background or you're not of a BAME background. And I think we also have to be a bit considerate and acknowledge that it's hard for us because we are the ones going through these issues, but then we can't then expect our non-BAME kind of counterpart to suddenly respond the way that we want to and suddenly change their whole lifetime way of thinking just because this is happening. It's going to take them time. So I think we need to just have that awareness as well, that everyone's going on that journey together.
Yeah. Like, ask those questions. I'm happy to talk about it. And I think that's another way of increasing your cultural competency as well, is just speaking to people from diverse backgrounds and just, hearing about their experiences and their views and what's the norm for them. So it's learning for you, but also I now feel more accounted for as part of this team and more considered and more welcomed. So yeah, it works both ways. You're learning, I'm feeling like, we're friends.
Do you guys think it's worth sort of speaking to whether it's your supervisor or manager if we do face microaggressions? I know that, a lot of us do face them and we sort of just, they go over our head or we just brush them off because it's something that we've got quite used to happen to us in work and out of work. So do you guys think it's worth starting to actually speak about it within work when they do happen? Because the other thing is as well, as supervisors and managers wouldn't know that we experience things if we don't tell them. So how would they support us if they don't know that it's happening? But I just think, is it worth mentioning it every time something happens as well? I'm not sure what the right answer is.
Yeah, I completely feel the same. Like if things happen, I always feel like, oh, am I bothering someone with this? It's that feeling of like you're bothering someone, but actually I want to encourage people to mention it because I definitely have. And there's the support is there. I think especially if you're going to someone you feel really comfortable with, and that might not be your management, that might be someone else completely in your team. But I think actually just discussing it, getting out there and kind of, it makes you feel better as well. And actually, I think finding out from your management side as well, so they need to know how to plan for these things when they happen, I suppose. So yeah, I definitely think it needs to be something that's openly discussed. But I can imagine actually when things quite distressing things will happen. That's something that I don't know how. That's definitely a personal thing, how the therapist feels like they want to deal with it and process it. And, is that going to be them having a conversation with their family or their friends first and then speaking to their management? Yeah, it's definitely a very personal thing, I think.
Again, I think having those support networks signposted for you, like those BAME networks and the wider community who can give you advice, and if you can explain the way you're feeling, the situation, and then they can tell you how to go about it. If they exist within the trust, then we should all be kind of like pushed into joining those communities. And I think that doesn't happen at the moment. People are not really given the direction of where to find support and education from.
I think having conversations around microaggressions is really difficult. And I think, even as a manager, I'm thinking myself, how do I discuss this with my team? I haven't done it yet as such, but it's quite hard to know what's the right avenue. Do I do a jazzy PowerPoint presentation, or do I have subtle one-to-ones? It's really hard for everyone to know how to do it. I think what really helps, I think what Marion, you were saying before about having a really, a friend, someone that they've got your back, and someone that can be a sounding board when you think something's happened but you're not quite sure, and you just want that kind of second opinion of, did that really just happen? Did you see that as well? Or am I imagining it? Okay, cool, I was just imagining it. Cool, okay. Oh yeah, you thought that was a bit strange. Okay, fine. So you want that in the workplace. And I think also, if you observe things yourself, you know, what better kind of way is there than to model that yourself? So speaking up, if you observe or see anything yourself. I had that experience a few years ago where it was a bit out of the blue, but afterwards I realised how powerful it was, and how much it helped me. I was just in a team meeting, and I made a comment, I made a suggestion about whatever was on the agenda, and it was fine. Then we carried on, and a few minutes later, somebody else had made the exact same point, but in a slightly more wordy and articulate way than perhaps I thought I did. Again, similar to what you were saying earlier about, oh, I don't think I'm very articulate, and you know, I'm from East London, I don't talk proper and all that stuff. So, you know, there's me bubbling along in a team meeting, and then someone else waltzes in, makes the exact same point as me. So again, my confidence, I'm kind of deflated, thinking, okay, that was literally what I said, but oh well, let's carry on. And then I forgot about it because I was used to that. That had happened. And then it was only after the meeting when someone else in the team pointed it out to me and said, oh my gosh, that was so, I cannot believe so-and-so did that. Like, are you okay? Like, I could see your face, and myself and the person next to me were thinking, that was so rude. And nothing else happened. The managers weren't aware, but I just felt like, wow, they've got my back. And they, you know, they were colleagues. We weren't great friends, or, you know, we didn't even socialize that much together. But the fact that they observed that and they said that back to me, I found so powerful, and I thanked them for that and said, you know, that really helped me. Like, you know, thank you so much for doing that. And I think if we just need to promote more of that, you know, even those tiny little things, you know, earlier on in my career, something like that, I would have gone home and just burst into tears thinking, I'm not good enough, I'm going to quit, or, you know, just completely catastrophizing. Whereas having that validation and knowing that other people recognize things and it's not in your head is so important. And then a part of me, I guess, debated, you know, shall I mention to that person that they're always kind of talking over someone else or repeating what they're doing? Also for that person's own learning, maybe they're not aware, maybe they've got their own insecurities that they feel like they always have to chip in all the time to show that they know what they're doing, but it's coming across as someone that's being quite annoying and not letting anyone else speak. So there's lots of assumptions being made and not as much being open and talking to each other. So yeah, but I would say that a good kind of initial thing to do would just be making sure you've got a friend, someone that you can just have that one-to-one chat with, and yeah, kind of speak up if you observe anything, or just to check in with that person and see if they're okay. Because then what you're doing is you're promoting what good conversations are like. So then if you're doing it with everyone else, you would hope, do it for you in return.
Thank you so much for being here, Nazia, and giving us your time. There was only 4 of us in this episode, but I still feel like we covered a wide breadth of topics and we made some really, really good points. So again, thank you so much. So today we spoke about workplace conversations, interviews, getting your foot in the door and progressing into higher positions within your trust or your organizations. Be sure to follow our Twitter and our Instagram,
SLT Time,
at SLT Time,
SLT Time, to keep up to date with new episode releases.
And that's the SLT for today.